want to be cognizant of everybody's time. Ahead and get started here this evening. So this is the first online Solar 101 for the Miami Valley Solar and EV Charger Co-op. This is the 2023 residential co-op. On the screen right now, you can see three of the um, places that went solar last year during the co-op. So on the left-hand side of the screen, the barn belongs to a gentleman named Ken. There is solar on each side of his barn. The smaller array on the brown brick um, on the right side of the screen belongs to Michelle. And then the bottom of the screen is the new solar rooftop array on the NAACP facilities there in Dayton. And all of these places were members of the 2022 co-op. So a bit of housekeeping before we get any further into this. Um, your Whenever you logged in, it would have been selected that you would be listening only. We do ask that you keep your mic off for the evening, just so that we can have good audio for all of the participants. If you have any questions, please submit those in the chat. My colleague Fatima will be watching our chat this evening, and she will be answering questions as we go along. And if there's any additional questions come up, there will be breaks throughout that we will pause and take those questions. And this webinar is being recorded, and we will send a link out tomorrow to everybody that RSVP'd, as well as having it available on the co-op webpage. So if you have anybody else that you know of that is curious about the co-op, maybe this type of timing isn't great for them in the evenings, they can always watch that later. Or if it's something that you need to catch some additional information from, it's available for you as well. So I'd like to take a moment to thank our partners for this co-op. So we have the City of Dayton, Montgomery County, the Sustainable Ohio Public Energy Council, Power a Clean Future Ohio, the Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission, the Ohio Environmental Council, Drive Electric Dayton, Miami Valley Solar Future, and the Lepla Associates Counselors at Law. So you might be wondering, what is Solar United Neighbors? So we are a vendor-neutral national nonprofit. We specialize in helping people to go solar through co-op programs like this, as well as other educational resources that we offer, even in the states that we do not have, a state staff in. We bring people together to fight for their energy rights. So like right now here in Ohio, whenever we're not working on co-op programming, we're working on community solar. So you might have started getting some emails about our programming for that. So that's House Bill 197. We were at the State House yesterday with about 90 of your fellow Ohioans and one state senator from Hawaii who had just happened to be wandering through and decided to give his 10 cents on why Ohio should also have community solar. So everybody went and gave some really wonderful testimony, though, on that. So hopefully we have some great news in the near future to show you, how we're progressing with that. So how did Sun get started? Back in 2007, Walter, Anya's son, was watching the movie The Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore with one of his friends, Diego. And they came in all excited about things and said, "Hey, we should go solar on the rooftop." And Anya was like, "That sounds great." And then when she started diving into that actual process, she found that it was a little more complicated and a lot more expensive than she had anticipated. And she said, to them, if I'm going to do this and we're going to do this, why don't we help other people do this? So they wandered around their neighborhood, and in total they found 50 homes in Mount Pleasant that wanted to go solar, and so they all went solar together, which was our very first co-op. And then other places started calling in and saying, "How did you make this happen? How can you help us cut red tape?" And so, Solar United Neighbors was founded. Since then, our national impact has been helping more than 6,500 families to go solar through 340 plus solar co-ops, just like this one. That's a total of 65 megawatts of solar that have been installed in rooftops across the country, and it's saved over 739,000 tons of carbon emissions. Here in Ohio, 603 households have gone solar with us, and that has helped to invest about $12 million into the local economy, which has helped to create 90 solar jobs and then helped to save 170 million plus pounds of carbon emissions from the atmosphere. And then this is another home from the 2022 co-op program there in the Dayton area. So we had a lot of great homes, and we're always grateful for people sharing their pictures so that we can show you local homes that have gone solar as well. So, one of the things that we're working to do is to make sure that we have a better energy system and one that is more fair and more equitable. So, this picture on the left-hand side might be familiar to those of you in the Miami Valley because that is the Valley Crest landfill. It is a brownfield site. Obviously, people can't live on what used to be a landfill. And then the pictures on the right-hand side of the screen are some of the coal plants. So what we're trying to do is have those type of facilities retired or covered up with a better new energy system so that people have a distributed energy system that is, a better one for the environment. So there's community solar projects like we're trying to help go through, and then other ones like the city of Dayton is sponsoring, which I know is going in 20 or brownfield areas in the Gym City area of town. And then there's rooftop solar, which helps to distribute the energy more fairly across the grid. So, what will we be talking about this evening? So, first up is solar technology. After we cover that, we'll be diving into some solar economics. And then finally, we'll wrap up with a few quick slides about how solar co ops work. And plugging right along, here we are with solar technology. So, how do, you know, panels work? So those panels are called solar photovoltaics, and they convert the energy that is the light hitting them into electricity. And they do that because they have a bunch of different components, which are encapsulated into glass and have an aluminum frame. Those little solar cells that we see inside of there are what actually do the work. But the rest of that helps to protect it because they want it to be on your rooftop and functional for 20 to 25 years, like the warranty says it will be. And even at that point, we still expect it to be producing energy. That's just how long they're warrantying them for. Beyond those panels, though, there are several other pieces of the system that we probably don't think quite as much about. So here in this picture, if you have a standard shingle roof, you'll be getting these pieces of racking installed. So this is the solar racking that holds it all in place, make sure it doesn't blow off in any storms or shift position. And they mount that by piercing through the roof. They have a special type of sealant that they use to make sure that those, marks and punctures don't cause any type of damage. They slide those little brackets like in between and up under the edge of the shingles. And then, like I said, they're weatherizing them. And if you do have a slate roof, there are some installers that work with the slate roofs, and they have a specific type of bracket that they have to use on those as well. And then they can also work on standing seam metal roofs. So if you've got one of those modern metal roofs, they've got these little clamps that hold on to that. They don't have to puncture through. The standing seam metal roof is the same way. And then there's also ballasted systems. That can go onto your rooftop if you have a flat roof, one of those rubber membrane roofs, or a concrete roof. We see these most often on like libraries or other types of buildings, like the NAACP was at the start of the program. So, but every once in a while, a rooftop of a home does have it as well. So, what's a good rooftop for solar? You've got to look at the orientation. So, first and foremost, south is the best here in the northern hemisphere. It gets the most direct light throughout the day. East and west also work really well. So, those are all options. If you do have just a north facing roof available, it's probably not going to be as economically viable for it. So, it's not always a great fit. Then you want to have little or no shading. Obviously, solar works best where it can catch that direct light instead of being shaded. We do not want you to take out trees though, because trees are absolutely vital for the sequestering of carbon emissions as well. And they also offer shading for your home, which helps to keep it cooler and keeps your energy costs down. So those trees are important. Leave them there, but it might make you a little less solar friendly for your rooftop. You want to make sure that you have enough space for the panels. We're only looking for about 250 square feet for the average size of system here in Ohio. So it's not like you have to have a giant house with a giant roof. You can have any number of sizes of roofs, but obviously the less things in it in that space, chimneys or dormers or anything like this, the better because that gives you that space for those panels to sit. And then you want a newer, undamaged roof. It doesn't have to be brand new, but we do say that you want to have, enough life left that we're not going to have to see you instantly paying to have the panels taken down, um, pay to have them stored, and then paid to have them put back up. So you want to make sure that you have, 15, 20 years left in your roof life. And whenever they come out to do your inspection with the solar companies, they will absolutely look at the roof condition and because they don't want to inherit problems either. So if you're already seeing some leaking or water damage, then that's something they're going to take into account. And if you live where you have a little bit of yard space, maybe you want to have ground mount solar instead of roof mount solar. And that is absolutely a possibility as well. Sometimes there's a few additional costs with it because there isn't a structure. They're having to build one for it. So sometimes that's a little bit more cost to it, but you can make sure that you're getting the appropriate direction. They may be able to put it onto something like a pergola for you so that it can serve a secondary purpose in your yard, to have shading for you to be under instead of just a ground mount array. And then there's also trenching fees most of the time for that. So it's just some things to keep in mind, but they have great ways to weatherize and critter proof those ground mount arrays so you don't have to worry about that as a factor. And then beyond the racking and those panels, there are also inverters because whenever the energy comes off of your panels, to start with, it is DC, direct current, and your household uses AC, alternating current. So it's very important that you have some device in between those panels and your electric supply inside your house that converts that to usable energy. So some of the systems will get what's known as a string inverter, which is where all of the panels feed into like one line, they go into the box, and it converts all the energy all at once. Sometimes there are microinverters, which are the small picture on the right side of the screen. Those mount directly on the back of each panel, and then each panel does its conversion there on the rooftop and sends the AC down to your house. And sometimes they also pair the string inverters up with DC optimizers which help to do some load balancing and everything so that the panels are all working their very best, even whenever one of them is maybe catching a little bit of shade or something and not having the optimal conditions for energy production. And then there is a piece that you already have in your household, and that is your electrical panel. So whenever the solar comes in, it has to connect to that electric panel so that it has, the ability to feed out to the rest of the house. So you do have to have some space left in your panel so that you can have that energy come in. Most electric systems in homes don't need any type of upgrade, but if you know you have an older panel from like the 1960s or earlier, or if you know you've got, most of your space in use. There's not going to be room for another round of breakers, then you're probably going to need to have the panel updated. But that is something that the installer, again, like the roof condition, will check with for you whenever they come into your home. So you don't have to know that for yourself. So, some of the terminology you'll hear throughout the presentation tonight and that you'll want to be aware of and know for whenever you are working on looking at your system and getting your proposals is kilowatt, which is how the energy at any given moment is measured coming off of the system, kilowatt hours, which is something that you should be familiar with already, because that's how energy is listed on your electric bills. That's how much energy you use over the course of time, like the month that your bill is generated for. And then the average size of a system here in Ohio is 6 kilowatts to 7 kilowatts. So the way I like to describe out kilowatts and kilowatt hours is that kilowatts are like a garden hose. And that's measuring, how much water is being delivered. And kilowatt hours are the thing you're trying to fill. So if you're looking at, that you have a tiny kiddie pool, equivalent of a house, you can get away with a smaller system, like a little, thin garden hose, one of those ones that flexes and stretches out. But if you've got a giant amount of power needs in your house. Maybe you have all electric appliances, an electric furnace, an electric car, and a hot tub that you're plugging in quite regularly. Then you're probably going to need a bigger hose, something maybe, like one of those larger fire hoses or, a couple big garden hoses to run the water in this case, the electricity to that Olympic sized pool that you're trying to fill over the course of a day. So again, kilowatts are that energy need in any given moment, but kilowatt hours are the energy needs over the whole course of time. So sometimes your system might be producing some additional energy beyond what your household needs. And whenever that happens, it pushes that excess back out to the grid, and that is called net metering. So you've got your little pictures here. You've got your solar panels absorbing the sun, and then they're running through the inverter to change it from DC to AC. Your household is using whatever it can of that energy. And then the excess energy is going out through your power meter, which is a bidirectional device that can both push power out and pull power back. And the grid is absorbing the extra. In the case of AES, they're in the Dayton area. They offer a 1-to-1 credit ratio on your generation. So for every credit you give to them, you are getting one credit back. And we do have customers that we've helped to go solar in the area that are reporting in that they have been able to achieve $0 bills. Or that they are even able to offset the distribution and transmission fees and be running into the negative during the summer and then having credits to roll forward into the winter. But if you are with something like a rural electric cooperative, I think Buckeye is down in that area as a rural electric cooperative, or if you're with a municipal company, feel free to reach out to us on an email at ohioteam@solarunitedneighbors.org. That'll be repeated a few times throughout the evening. But if you need to know if that company has net metering, we can help you to look that up. So what might your electric bill look like? So this is a sample bill we have from a customer there in the area. Their total at the last billing was $12.70, which it shows that they had a, you know, payment made for that $12.70 for the month of June. And then they were able to get back a generation credit in the month of July for $13.96, which helped offset their distribution fee of $3.47 and their customer charge, also, jokingly known as the fee of $10. So their current electric bill was negative 49 cents. So they didn't owe anything in that month. And the other way that you can look at those and see that is that their delivered power was 817 kilowatts, but their distributed energy from home to grid was 1,010 kilowatt hours. So they were making more energy than they were using. So they offset all of their household use as well as pushed more back out to the grid than they were pulling, overnight. So there are a few optional pieces that sometimes folks like to get during their installations. And the first one up here is a consumption meter. So the cost range, if you have the installer put it in, is somewhere between $200 and $600. Sometimes it comes free with the equipment, which we'll show you in the next picture. And what these do is they track your household consumption as well as the solar production so that you can receive from all of your apps a more complete picture of your energy usage. So here is an electric panel. This happens to be my personal panel. And at the top of this picture here in the little yellow oval, you can see my consumption meters. And yes, my panel was uncovered right here. My husband did go to school to be an electrical engineer, so he's fully equipped to be able to handle taking the cover off to get a picture like this for me and do it safely. But that lets us be able to track both sides of the production and the usage so that we have a good picture of what we're using and having at any given moment. And then on these apps, the way you'll be able to see that is that if you don't have a consumption meter, all you'll be seeing is what your solar does, but not what your household uses. So you wouldn't have both sides of the graphs, which is fine. It still works very well. A lot of people like to do it that way just so that they can keep track of what they are doing. But if you're wanting that complete picture of it, it's something worth asking them about. Some of the equipment, like this Solar Edge inverter right here, that usually would have a cover on it, but it doesn't in this picture. The little circle at the bottom of it represents where its consumption monitor is built in. So in that case, there's no additional cost with that product because it's already built in. But if it's something that you're wanting to have that additional data available, it's a good point to bring up with the installer to see if it's already built in or if it's something else that you want to have, added to your system. A second optional part of it is the battery backup. So whenever your power goes out, the grid is going to go down. And then the solar is also going to shut off. And that's a safety mechanism because otherwise, the additional energy that the system is generating beyond whatever your household is using at that point would push out to the lines and would toast some of those nice linemen that are working to get everybody else's power back restored. So if you want to have energy during outages or overnight whenever your panels aren't producing, then you'll want to have some battery backup. Some of the reasons that people like to do that nowadays are that storms are getting more severe. This map probably looks kind of familiar to you because that is from June of 22, whenever the large storms rolled through and damaged the transmission lines. And then we had the really big heat wave the next week, and lots of people lost power for days at a time. Um, you might need to have battery backup if you have frequent utility outages. I know some areas of towns are sometimes more prone to having those happen. Or if you have critical loads at home, you've got a well pump, grandma's on some oxygen and you don't want her to turn off whenever the power goes out. Or if you're trying to do some emergency or disaster preparedness, you're worried about, the national grid, something happening to it, or you just think there might be a zombie apocalypse, no matter what it is, those are all good reasons that you as well might want a battery. And then In some cases, we're starting to see in places like California or Texas, whenever their grid reaches peak demand points during the day, that sometimes they are saying, hey, if you have extra power in a battery that you're willing to give to us, we'll pay you a premium for it. So that isn't happening here in Ohio yet, but that is something that we're starting to see in some parts of the country, whenever they're needing more energy than their generation can handle. So there's a future where that might be a possibility. And if you're wanting more information on battery storage, you can hit up solarunitedneighbors.org/storage. And if you forget that, don't worry about it because there is a little, magnifying glass at the top edge of the screen on our homepage to let you search for battery or backup or storage, any number of keywords, and it'll help you find that guide as well. And the third and final optional piece that I always try to tell everybody about is an EV charger. So maybe you're thinking to yourself, I don't have an electric car. I don't think I want to get an electric car. Well, you still might want to think about getting an outlet installed because those 240 outlets, like you see here at the bottom edge of the screen, um, that outlet box is super handy for a number of other things. Maybe you want to plug in some holiday lights that has a 120 outlet in it. So even on the far side of, your house where maybe you don't have an outlet right now, you could have one. Or maybe with that 240 volt outlet, you want to run a second dryer or a smoker or a welder or a kiln or a gigantic hot tub or sauna. So now you're going to have that outlet. And while they're there installing your solar, you've got an electrician on site. You're not having to pay for somebody to come out additionally and do that. So it's a really nice thing to have already there. It also helps to future-proof your house in case your cousin with an RV shows up for Christmas and you want to, have a way for him to plug in and not come inside all the time. And then if you do have an electric vehicle, you're thinking you might like to have one, maybe you want to go ahead and have them hardwire an actual electric vehicle supply equipment piece, like you see at the top in the little green circle. So those are all options. Usually it offers some cost savings. It lets you be able to, group all of your stuff together on your taxes for the credits. So it can be very productive for a few different reasons there. And that takes us out of the solar technology questions. I've seen several things scrolling by in the chat. Is there anything additional that needs answered? Or,
Yeah, we have been having an interesting discussion on the life of solar panels and manufacturers. So that's pretty much taken care of. Um, I guess there is one question which is outside of this discussion, which we'll take towards the end. So you can carry on well.
okay, all right. Well, we will jump on ahead to solar economics then. And if you think of any more technology questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll always circle back to things at the end that haven't been answered, or that we can copy them down and shoot you an email on them over the next couple days. So, solar economics. Solar is a good investment for your house since it first started being a thing that people like to install, copying probably Jimmy Carter whenever he was the first president that put it on top of the White House in the 70s. The price has dropped significantly. So it's no longer a specialty item, it's a very common item. So we're seeing the price balance out quite well. And there is a 30% federal tax credit, which was restored last year thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act. So that's a nice little chunk of it that you're able to get back on your taxes whenever you file them. So part of how a solar co-op helps to reduce the cost is by reducing the installer soft costs, which lets you save money. It also lets them reduce and balance out their labor costs. So without co-op programming, they work somewhat seasonally, and so they have to sometimes let people go over the course of winter in this region, and then hire them all back in the spring, trying to find people and stuff. And it can mean that the market for that labor is a little bit tenuous. So it's a better balance whenever there's co-ops going on because it lets them spread those jobs out more evenly throughout the year. They can work on little parts and pieces of it, like, in the basements or some touch up work on the good days that we do have throughout the winter, and then be doing the installs in the spring, summer, or fall, pretty continuous. And it also lets them bulk order these system components, which of course saves them money. And then they do pass that along whenever they're placing their competitive bids. So that federal tax credit, as I previously mentioned, restored about halfway through last year to 30%. It will step down to 26% in 2033 and 22% in 2034 before sunsetting out entirely. But it's good to know that that is back available at that 30%, that because that is a hefty amount that gets returned to you as long as you have the tax liability. And we can look over some sample types of pricing here. So if you were to get a 5 kilowatt system, our co-op average right now has been running at about $2.70 a watt, which would mean the system would come out to about $13,500. Your federal tax credit would be $4,000, $4,050, which would bring your net cost of that system, if you're applying that credit to your loan, or to your, amount of that you financed, down to $9,450. Then we conservatively estimate in the first year that you would save about $932. Over the course of 10 years, you would be saving $9,967. And over the lifetime that is warranted and that you know that you're going to have your system of 25 years, that you'd be looking at about $27,000 in savings, which means that you'd end up with a net profit over the course of that time of about $18,000. And then, of course, as you get into larger systems, the price of them increases, but so does the amount coming back on that 30% credit. And just in case you don't have quite that amount of tax liability, let's say that you're looking at that and you're like, oh man, I only have $2,000 in tax liability. It's okay because the solar credit is able to be spread out for up to 5 years. So in that first year, you could get back 2,000. In that second year, you could get back 2,000. And then in that third year, you could scoop up that last $50 of that system and have that all balanced out, which is a nice little feature that you don't have to take it all at once. Some financing options here in Ohio. If you do live in a rural area, you could look at a REAP program, which is a federal grant program for farms and rural businesses. If you're inside of any town proper, that's probably not going to work for you unless you do happen to be doing more than 50% of your household um, finances are recuperated through farming, but that's a lot of income for a city farm, so it's not quite as likely to be happening. Um, if you can take out a home equity line of credit or refinance to include the solar, that usually gets you some pretty good rates. There is installer financing from some of the installers, though we always caution you to really look at those numbers to make sure that that makes financial sense. Just like any other type of financing offered from, a dealership or, any type of other work that you might have done. Sometimes they have installer fees and financing fees that can make that not as great of a picture for you, but it is an option if you have to take it. We work with a group called the Clean Energy Credit Union. They specialize in loans for solar, heat pumps, geothermal, electric vehicles, wind turbines, and things like that. They don't do any other type of loans. So they're very good at what they do. They're small. firm though, so be cautious. The only thing I'll warn you, I have a loan with them for one of my electric vehicles. They're a little slow to respond, just because they are smaller, but they're always super friendly. And if you're like me and you like doing business with those smaller companies, they can be really great to go through for that. And then here in Ohio, we do have something called the EcoLink subsidized loans. Those are a program from the state of Ohio. The amount that they subsidize varies. The last time I was looking, it was something like 3% that they would knock off for up to the first 7 years of your loan, but that varies by each person applying. So that's if you're interested in finding out about that, talk to the installer or talk to your finance company if you're working with somebody like Huntington or PNC or Chase, because they probably have somebody there who knows about that program and can help you to see what your numbers would look like from it. But it's all over the place. So, and we can look at some examples of some of the financing. So let's say that you did get that 5 kilowatt system, which is just a hint smaller than the average here in Ohio, but it's a good number to look at. So let's say that you had that $13,500 and you decided you wanted to pay your loan off in over the next 10 years. If you got a 4% loan, that would mean that you were paying about $96 a month. You're saving about $78 a month on your electric bill, which would mean that your net payment is negative $18. And the other way to look at it is if you got a 7% loan, that's going to put you at about $110 of your monthly payment on it. So you would be, you know, saving a little less because your finance fees went up, but it's still a good term on it. Um, so, and then if you wanted to go with a 15-year term, which is a very common one as well for this type of loan, that would bring your payments down to $70 or $85 respectively, depending on what your percentage of your loan was. And those are going to fluctuate from person to person because, you know, whatever your credit score is or your history with that bank or what kind of financing you decide to go through with it. In my case, whenever I went solar on my rooftop, I looked for a loan term that would equal out to be what my current electric bill was or a little less. So we went from having about a $220 a month electric bill. Mind you, that did include electric vehicles as well as our household use, but about $220 a month. I'm offsetting 100% of my energy usage about 9 months of the year. So I have $0 bills most of the time. And my loan payment is $184. So at any point during the year, I'm paying way less in my solar loan, which will be finished off, in my case, in 5 years, um, than I would be in my, power bills, because we've dropped, some extra back on it. Whenever we got our taxes back, we put that straight back on it. So we're looking at a 5-year payoff on ours. So it all depends on how you're looking at it. My goal was just to not be paying my electric bill any more often than I had to be. So I wanted those numbers to balance out. And that brings us to the end of the finance section. So before I plug along into the co-op details, it looks like Fatima's been putting up loads of great links for you to get some additional information. And I'm not seeing any finance questions, but if anybody has one that they hurriedly want to drop into chat now, we can talk about it. And otherwise, we can circle back for those at the end if anything else comes up. Get a sip of water and then now we'll talk about how solar co-ops work. So why might you want to join a solar co-op? It gets you a good value on the installation. We're currently seeing savings of about 30 cents a watt on the low end, sometimes up to $1 per watt, which if you look at it over, that big of a system, you're talking about a few $1,000s less in expenses, and that's primarily because of those bulk purchases that they're able to make. If it's offsetting some money for them, they absolutely want to be the ones that, those installers are very competitive and they want to win these co-ops. You have tons of support throughout the process. Anytime you have questions, even if you decide going solar through this isn't great for you right now, we're right there with you every step of the way. So you can send us a message and say, "Hey, I've never heard of this brand of panels," or "Hey, I got a different bid from outside the co-op and it looks way different than inside the co-op." So we'll look through those proposals with you because in the end, we want you to get what is the right fit for your house, not necessarily going through the co-op. So we're always going to be there for, answering those questions and helping you figure that out. It lets you connect with fellow solar enthusiasts. Like up here, I see Tom is asking some questions. So now everybody knows if they bump into Tom out, maybe at a local donut shop or whatever, that, "Hey, Tom, you're in that co op with me. Let's look over our proposals together." So you've made, those acquaintances, and you're able to connect with those people, and have that camaraderie going through a process together. And it lets you become a part of the growing solar movement. Because, like I mentioned earlier, even if solar on your rooftop isn't right for you, maybe you want to find out more about community solar. And obviously, if there's 90 people that could take time out of their day on a Wednesday to go to the state house and talk to their house reps about it, with us, that's a whole bunch of people across the state that are very interested in this and wanting to see solar be a bigger part of our area and communities. So this solar co-op launched on the 7th of this month. So you are getting in right at the beginning of it by attending this evening. Some of you might have been at the event that we had for the launch, which was at Fifth Street Brewing Company there in Dayton. And they are currently looking at adding solar to their rooftop. So you might have a nice solar brewery to be visiting here in the near future. So we're currently in steps 1 through 3, which is where we learn about solar together. We sign up on the co-op page to become a member of the co-op. It is free to do that. There is no obligation. You do not have to go solar through our process. It just will get you a free roof review where we'll look at a satellite picture or two of your home, help get a measurement of it, and make sure that solar would fit on your roof and that you're not going to have too much shading. And if that's the case and something eliminates you, we're going to let you know. Hey, we see a giant tree in the picture, and that's not going to be a great fit for you. And then we're not even going to pass you along to the installer because you don't need them contacting you if you can't go solar. But then if you're eligible, if you've got a good roof for it, we're going to share you to the installer once they're selected. And that way you can decide if you want to proceed or not. So in mid-November, we're going to have what we call the selection committee. So right before that, what we'll do is we'll send out a request for proposal to all of the local installers. We've got about 140 of them on the regional list here that we send out that email to. We ask them about 30 questions. What kind of pricing, what kind of equipment, where does the equipment come from, what kind of hiring practices do they have? Um, how do they pay their people? Do they have additional benefits for them? So forth and so on, you know, and then we'll have all of that information. We'll drop it onto a spreadsheet so that it's easy for everybody to look at and everybody to compare. We will ask all of you and any other members that have came along in that amount of time if they would like to be on the selection committee. It's completely volunteer. You're going to give about 2 hours of your evening one day to look over those bids together. We'll have done reference checks and we'll have all that information for you. And then everybody at that meeting that evening gets one vote for who they would like to see as the installer. We'll tally those votes, and that is who will be selected. So that process is done completely transparently and by the members of the co-op. Fatima and I will be there for you, but neither one of us will be voting because we're not going solar through that co-op. So that is all on the people who are actually, going to be working with that installer to do that process with. And then after that, the installer will start sending out individual proposals to the households. There will still be a couple months that people that hear about the co-op after the selection can still sign up and go through this process and get their own proposal. If you decide to proceed at that point, that's whenever you would sign the contract with that installer. And then you'll set up payments and everything with them. You'll go through the timeline. They'll outline it for you on when they can get to your installation, and everything, and you'll get that all set up. And then once the majority of the co-op has installed, we'll get everybody back together for a party to celebrate, share pictures like we've been looking at throughout the presentation, so that we can all celebrate those solar rooftops together or solar, ground mounts if that's what you decide to go with. So this is probably a familiar looking page to some of you because you might have clicked that little events tab that is like down below the doorway of the house, and found this meeting this evening. But this is our co-op page. So if you like what you heard tonight and you want to get some additional information, get that free roof review and start moving on through the process, you can hit that join the co-op button. Um, like I said, this one has just launched. We're already up to 26 members. Our goal is 150, but even at this point, we have enough that we can get a nice competitive bid from the installers. So if you haven't been to this website and you're looking for it, it is at solarunitedneighbors.org/Miami Valley. Um, and you can also find that off of our Ohio page or even off of the front page if you just find our website as a whole. If you would like to be more involved, maybe you've been out to an event like, Earth Day and you met Mary at one of our tables, or maybe you've been to one of the other farmers markets or something and you saw Joe and, he gave you a flyer and that's something you think you would like to do. We are always looking for volunteers. I'm going to launch a poll here that has just one question for everybody. So that would let Morgan, who is our engagement specialist here for the area, she'll reach out to you with an email to say, hey, I saw that you would like to have some messaging to send this webinar to your friends. So here's a link to the video and here's an email message you can send them. Or, hey, I seen that you would like to have a yard sign that says go solar with me through this process. So how about I mail one to you and she'll get your address and do that. Or maybe, that you'd like to work at a table or distribute flyers. So whatever it is that you're interested in doing, she will hook you up with the right information for that. So we'll leave that poll open for a few seconds more here so that if anybody's interested, they have the ability to answer that. And then she would send you that information in the next couple days. And if you change your mind later or you decide later, hey, you do seem like really cool people to hang out with. I would like to come to the, next event and, talk to folks about solar too. Then you can, hook up with us at OH team at solarunitedneighbors.org and we can always get you that information later. All right, so I'm going to end the poll, and that way we can see the rest of the slides together and move on along. But yeah, we're always looking for folks to take pictures or videos to share things on social media, some very basic small asks. And then this brings us to the end of our presentation. So if you've thought of any other questions throughout the course of the evening, you can go ahead and drop them into the chat now and either Fatima or myself will answer them. So all throughout the evening and into the near future, at least, I plan to continue to be Mariah Williams. I'm the Ohio Program Associate, so I work here in this area as well as, Columbus, Cincinnati, clear over to Wheeling, West Virginia, basically anything on the south end of the state. You can reach me or Tristan, the state director, at ohteam@solarunitedneighbors.org. Um, and